At the time of Jesus, the busiest port city in the world was the Egyptian city of Alexandria. It had several harbors, and ships from all around the known world sailed into them for the purposes of trade and transportation. But the harbors there were notoriously dangerous because of hidden sandbars, and many a ship was wrecked before reaching the safety of the port. In the year 280 BC, the king of Egypt decided to erect something to help the sailors come safely into port. A three-tiered structure was erected on the island of Pharos, right outside the city. Inside this cylindrical-shaped structure burned a fire, and a complicated series of mirrors made from polished bronze directed the light of this fire out onto the water. This became the first lighthouse. The famous Pharos Lighthouse stood 400 feet high, and its light could be seen for 30 miles out into the sea. One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, it stood there from 280 BC all the way up until the 14th century AD, when it finally came tumbling down in a series of powerful earthquakes. For over 1,600 years, this wonder of the world stood as a beacon of hope to sailors, a house providing light to those in darkness, fear, and hopelessness. Countless lives were saved by these rays of light. We see historical lighthouses along the California coast. Many of the New England lighthouses are famous landmarks, but they all trace their origins back to this one in Egypt. I myself have a lighthouse. It's a little one made of ceramic and was given to me by a dear sister. This lighthouse stands in the room where I sometimes receive visitors. If a visitor comes in with some problem, perhaps fear or hopelessness or despair, I sometimes light a candle inside this lighthouse, and the light pours out of its window, symbolically illumining the darkness, the hopelessness, the despair of life. It is a powerful symbol, for all of us seek something to light our way through the dangerous waters of life. How wonderful to find light to give us a glimmer of hope that we will make it safely to shore. Who made that first lighthouse so many years ago, that wonder of the world that stood for 1,600 years? Well, back in those days when monuments were erected or buildings constructed, a marble tablet was placed inside with the name of the ruler who commissioned it. So we know that this was built under the reign of King Ptolemy II of Egypt. But of course, it wasn't the king who did the work. An architect designed this fabulous structure, a man by the name of Sostratos. He didn't want to be forgotten either. He didn't want this king to get all the credit. So in a cunning plan, he inscribed the name of the king onto a tablet of plaster rather than marble. Underneath the plaster, he had his own name inscribed in marble, knowing that with the passage of time, the plaster would crumble and only the name of the architect would be visible for us for as long as the lighthouse stood. That is the only reason we know the name of the architect as well. We hear in the Gospel the story of another lighthouse. A lighthouse not built of stone or brick, a lighthouse that was a human being by the name of John the Baptist. John came to bring light into the world. Unlike the architect, he did not want the credit. He was always pointing to Jesus. He knew that he himself was not the light, and we are told in the prologue to St. John's Gospel, John came into the world. He was not the light, but he came to reflect the light. He came so that the true light could shine through him and illumine the lives of others. He was a true lighthouse. All of us go through life as through dark waters. All of us go through times of fear and danger when we might become shipwrecked on the sandbars of life. All of us go through dark times of despair and hopelessness, and each of us looks for a beacon of hope. Each of us seeks a lighthouse to show us the way to safety, to give us an indication that we are going to make it. But all of us are also called to be lighthouses to one another, to allow God's light to shine through us, be reflected off our own lives, and illumine the darkness that others find themselves in. Sometimes it is difficult to see the light coming from my little ceramic lighthouse, just as it is sometimes difficult for us to see light at the end of the tunnel, hope in the darkness of life. I notice that when people come to me in the late hours of the afternoon while the sun is still shining, and I light that candle of my lighthouse, you can barely see it flicker. But then if they stay a little while, and the evening shadows begin to fall, and darkness overtakes the room, that tiny light in that tiny lighthouse becomes quite luminous and lights up the whole room. The darker the night, the darker the despair, the fear, the hopelessness, the more the light will illumine. The light always remains the same. It is the darkness that increases, and it is the darkness that allows us to see the light more and more. Lighthouses are very helpful in a world of fear and hopelessness. Perhaps that is why our inimitable American founding father, Benjamin Franklin, is said to have remarked, with the usual twinkle in his eye, that lighthouses can be more helpful than churches. Let our church be not merely a church, but a lighthouse, bringing light and hope to those around. Let us, each of us, be a lighthouse and allow God's light to be lit inside of us, so that this light may shine through us, be reflected off of us, and bring a ray of hope into the darkness of other people's lives. Through us, may there shine radiantly and powerfully the awesome light of God.